Imagine that.
Yep.
Is that for the end of the legislative session or for Halloween itself?
I don't know what it is. God.
Well, I
Yep.
see that we are now live and on the air. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Vermont State Senate Committee on Institutions. Today being March 12th, 2021, I'm Joe Benning, your host for this afternoon's shenanigans. I am also the chair of this committee, come from Caledonia County. I see that we have Senators Mazza from Grand Isle, Ingalls from Essex Orleans, and Parent from Franklin County. We are expecting Senator McCormick from Windsor County to be joining us shortly. And our first topic of conversation this afternoon is a discussion about the clean water portion of the capital bill, specifically the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board's contribution to that discussion. And we have Gus Seelig and Jen Holler with us today to start that conversation. I'm not sure which one of you would like to begin the remarks, but please, by all means, flip a coin and let us know who that would be.
Okay. Good afternoon, Senator and committee members. For the record, I'm Gus Seelig. I'm the director for the board. Jen Holler is with me. She's our policy director. And we thought the instructions were both to cover clean water and the other section in the capital bill. So the presentation will cover both of those things. So Jen, if you want to put the slideshow up, or is Denise driving it today? Briefly, as an overview, we are in the capital bill and the governor's request at $4 million. That's a reduction from this past year. And you gave us a chance to give you an overview, a brief introduction a few weeks back, but we'll get in a little bit more depth today. So as we begin this presentation, this is just one piece of the state's marvelous landscape in the Cambridge Valley. And let's go on to the next slide, Jen. And this just gives you a sense of what our statute tells us we are to do. It's in 10 VSA Chapter 15. And while people think of us as housing and conservation, I'm very mindful of the reasons that you put into statute that we're to do our job, and that's to pay attention to its primary importance for economic vitality and quality of life. Senator Mazza will recall that when we first began back in the 80s, there was a fair amount of skepticism about whether these two functions could really be complementary and work together. And one of the nicest moments I ever had in my life was at an event that the Green Mountain Club put on for a big anniversary. And I had dinner that night with Senator Gannett. And as you all know, he and his wife were great promoters of the protection of the Long Trail, which we've worked on with this committee. And he said to me, I had real doubts about whether this marriage could work, and you guys have really proved that it could. And that was a highlight for me, knowing that he was skeptical at the beginning, but also that he was willing to give the idea a chance. The photograph that you're looking at on the left speaks to our dual mission. And what's happening here is that the city of Burlington got a 12-acre park along Lake Champlain and along the bike path. This is the old Catholic Diocese and Burlington College site.
Wow, I know they're building. Look at that. Wow.
Well, these are not all built yet, Senator.
No, but they're going full guns. Yeah.
They are going full guns. We've completed 2 buildings on this site. The developer's done 2 buildings by himself. A 5th building he's doing himself will start, I'm told, this spring or summer. And the goal is to have 700 homes, and the city of Burlington's zoning requires that a quarter of them be affordable, so we're contributing to making that happen. What's also important about this site is it's adjacent to the old north end of Burlington, and there is a public path through this land and on down to the beach on Lake Champlain. And I think some of you knew John Ewing, who was the president of the Bank of Vermont for many years, and then in retirement, Governor Dean asked him at a difficult point to take on chairing the environmental board. And he really he was also our longest serving board member as a citizen and chair of our board for several years. And he said that we needed to grow in Vermont in a way that respected the culture and the landscape of the state. He actually founded an organization called Smart Growth Vermont, and that's a framework for how we go about balancing these interests of conserving the countryside while investing in our downtowns and village centers. Let's go on to the next slide, Jen. And of course, as the chair said, we are in the Capitol bill in part to protect water quality. And back about 2012, the legislature actually came to us and said, we'd like to make this a more explicit part of your statute. And so it now says that we always thought it was implied that we should protect the surface waters of the state, but now it says that explicitly. And these are three examples of various conservation projects that contribute to water quality. On the right is a farm in Calais, and the Kingsbury branch to the Winooski River flows through it, and there are now riparian protections around that waterway. You're also looking at Eagle Mountain, which is a great recreation spot in Milton, as another example of a parcel of land that really contributes to water quality. These are the results that we've achieved for the state over the last 2 years. And I would really point you to the impacts that we have, which are very broad for a program that goes to getting farmers on the next generation of farmers onto the land, goes to rural community development, along with water quality. One of the pictures you see here is a new building in Lyndonville that just opened last summer. I was at a community visit put on by the Council on Rural Development in Lyndonville 3 or 4 years ago, and it's one of the few towns in the kingdom that's actually had a growth in population and school-age population in recent years, and really needed more housing. And what was here before was really, this is right on the road over to Burke, really not looking good at all. And I think a much better, both added units and provides a much better entry into the community.
Where's that, Joe? Is that over in Lyndonville, your district, or?
It is there.
Yeah, that's about 3 blocks from my office.
Oh, wow. That.
Well, I hope you feel like it's an improvement to what was there before, Senator. Middle photo is Jane Clifford's husband, Eric, a well-respected farmer from Addison County, and we've purchased development rights from them as they get ready to think about transitioning their farm to the next generation. And we spoke last time about this bridge we're building up in Newport that will connect the Bluffside Farm to downtown Newport with bike paths up to the Canadian border. Let's move along, Jen. This is the 3 lines we have in the Capitol bill. One is a general line for housing and conservation in section 16. In section 10, there are 2 lines, and one is for conservation with water quality as a benefit, and the other is for ag water quality projects. And we'll talk about the different kinds of projects we do with both of those lines. Let's move along, Jen. So here are 3 different situations that we fund as a matter of water quality. And the fellow on the left is in Paulet, and he got a water quality grant. We make grants up to $40,000 that helps farmers match up either with the BMP program or the NRCS programs, or sometimes do something innovative without either of those programs. But he did a bed and pack barn to improve water quality. On the right is the Fitzgerald Farm, former Fitzgerald farmland in Colchester. It was a terrible place for agriculture. There was no way really to farm there without having water quality issues. And what we did was we made a grant to Fish and Wildlife to buy that land, and it'll be restored for uses other than agriculture. It'll become a natural area. It floods regularly, and it'll be much better in this use than it was in agriculture from a water quality perspective. We've done 3 or 4 retirements of farmland now, and we expect we'll be doing more. And
Well,
then the boys.
That's what that means, farm retirement.
Right. We're taking it out of
Fix.
farm production because it's just the wrong place. It's just gonna,
Oh,
there's
well,
no place good to store manure there. You're just gonna end up with problems.
Yeah, I thought for a moment there that you were retiring farmers to that location.
Well,
An old
Yeah.
farmer's home.
yep. And then the Boisano Farm is a more traditional farmland conservation project in St. Albans that we recently funded, protecting 264 acres on the lake, but with 140 acres as a wetlands complex that'll have special protections in the easement. So that gives you a range of the sorts of things we do. We're spending $400,000 to $500,000 a year on this water quality grant program. These folks up in the islands, we visited a few years ago. They have an operation called Pegasus Meats, where they raise pork. They also are doing eggs. But two others, the Vosburg Farm in Swanton, got help with a new manure storage infrastructure. And in Sheldon, we helped an operator there purchase a no-till planter that will reduce runoff and soil erosion. So those are the sorts of activities that we're doing with these grant programs. This is a farm up in Highgate. And on the upper right, you see what the farm looked like in 1999 when we first conserved it. And it was owned by Mr. Schweiner. And a few years later, his son Guy took it over. And Guy is now considered an all-star for the Natural Resource Conservation Service. In fact, when Vicki Drew had the national chief of NRCS, come to Vermont last summer, this is the place that she took him to see how somebody uses NRCS programs effectively. Guy took the farm organic, and he has utilized pretty much every practice that NRCS will fund to improve the quality of this farmland and improve his soil health. He understood that having sold development rights, that he really needed to invest in his soils. He's been successful enough that we helped through development rights him buy another parcel, so he's grown his herd over the years. And when I was up there last summer, he also indicated that he's now planning for his son to take over in a few years. And I want to say his dad is still involved in the farm and been very supportive of all the changes that were made. Alburgh, Vermont, we helped the state about 20 some years ago buy some land that has become the Alburgh Sand Dunes Park. There is now an opportunity, and the Nature Conservancy is busy fundraising. But our funds will be needed to draw down a big federal grant to purchase an additional 160 acres. It's a gorgeous, beautiful place, and we think also will ultimately contribute to why people might want to be in Alburgh, especially on a beautiful summer's day. So let's move along, Jen. Here's two other kinds of conservation projects that we do with that section of the Capitol bill. On the right is a 16-acre parcel in Guilford. There used to be a salvage and junkyard on this property that's been removed, and clearly water's going through it. And then the Bramhall Nature Preserve, which is 350 acres in Bridgewater, is a different kind of conservation project with upland streams, headwaters that need to be protected, and ultimately improve water quality. Let's move along. One of the things the legislature worked on water quality legislation is you created a system that ANR is overseeing with clean water service providers. In many parts of the state, that will be a regional planning commission, but NVDA declined to take on that role, and ANR came to us and said, would you try taking on the role for Lake Champlain? So we will be hiring a person next year and serving in that capacity for the kingdom. We've been in many meetings with local folks, the conservation district folks, to begin the planning work to take that role on for the Lake Champlain Basin. Let's move along, Jen. Central to our housing work are a couple things. The statute asks us to get permanent affordability. Programs that were funded by the feds in the 70s and 80s generally had 20-year terms of affordability or less. Senator McCormick will be familiar with this building on the right, which is right in the heart of Windsor. And what happened here is that the whole community, the business association, the hospital, the social service providers, the school, all came to us and said, this building needs to be turned around. It was owned by an out-of-state Massachusetts investor. He'd gotten a federal contract and increased the density in it. It was up to 72 apartments. We reduced the density down to 58. It was an awful place for anybody to live and raise kids. When I first visited there were needles all through the playground area, lots of drug activity, and it's been turned around tremendously. On the left, in the early 1990s, Senator Parent, I don't know if you've come across Hugh Gates, who was in the legislature back in the 70s, but he walked into our office one day. He was the head of the Franklin Phone Company, and he said, can't remember if he won a lottery or the Franklin Phone Company won a lottery, but he had a chunk of money and he wanted to do something for the seniors in Franklin. And most of the state players said, Franklin up on the Canadian border, we're not sure it's really worth the trouble. We don't know if there's enough of a market, but you knew his community better than any bureaucrat. And he convinced us there was plenty of need. And so with our assistance, they opened housing in 1993, and it was so successful that 8 years later, they added an assisted living wing, and just been a real asset, I think, to Franklin, Vermont.
They have a lot of community meetings there as well. So it's a nice property.
Yeah. Let's move along. A feature of our work has always been in our downtowns and village centers, and these are examples of that. On the left is a project we just recently agreed to fund, 44-unit senior project in downtown Randolph. Has worked well, but it's tired. We've found high levels of lead contamination in the water, so that'll be fixed. The elevator is old and too small for the sort of cot that comes from an ambulance, needs to be replaced. We'll put in a second elevator and create a community space. In the middle is the new transit center building in downtown Montpelier, across from, you can see from the State House, and terrific apartments that opened last year. Top right, and that was funded with the Housing Revenue Bond. Top right is downtown St. Johnsbury, and bottom right is downtown Bennington. For most of the last 20 years, the 10,000 square feet of commercial space in downtown St. Johnsbury has sat vacant. The building has been the subject of a long bedbug infestation. It was owned by the same out-of-state investor that owned that building I showed you a few minutes ago in Windsor, and it became the community's number one, after a community visit, community development priority. Everybody rallied together and said, we can't have a good downtown until we turn this building around. So it's under a major renovation now. The local economic development group has purchased as a condominium all the commercial space, so it'll be their job to get that leased out. It's one contractor working on both the residential and the commercial spaces. And again, we're going to reduce the density in this building. Some of the apartments were just too tiny and just needed to be modernized.
You were downtown doing there for a minute there, Gus, with your PowerPoint presentation. I've noticed through the years when somebody comes to make PowerPoint presentations, they always include pictures of virtually everybody who's sitting on the committee's backyard district. And you were doing real well until that particular picture. You got my seatmate there next to Congressman Welch. And I know I was there that day. I just didn't walk down the street to have my picture taken. I just wanted to make that.
Look at that. All right. Yeah.
Well, when we have the grand opening in the fall,
I'll be there for the ribbon cutting. Don't worry.
Yes, we will look forward to seeing you then.
Oh, God, you'll be in the picture. Don't worry. Oh, boy.
So the building in Bennington is right at the cross section of Routes 7 and 9, and I toured that 2 years ago. The upper floors had been vacant since the 1970s. The head of the Bank of Bennington is also the president of the local economic development group. And when Governor Scott came down for the groundbreaking, the president said, this is a project that makes no economic sense, but it makes all the community development sense in the world. Both the hospital and Bennington College are taking on major leases in this building, and we're providing some help with some of the residences that will be put into it. Bottom left is a building right in the center of downtown Springfield. Again, the commercial space has been vacant for most of the last decade. The local economic development group has a master lease for that space. Just opened and filled in a month's time the 20 apartments, including 4 for homeless youth. So that's been a great success as well. Let's move along, Jen. For your colleagues and you who are interested in energy efficiency, that's a big part of our work. The building in Milton is the first multifamily building in the state to get passive house certification. The building on the right was an empty Catholic school, and there's another building that the sisters lived in adjacent to it. We have one modern wood heating boiler, pellet boiler for both buildings. They're among 940 apartments that are being heated with wood pellets that we've funded around the state. Bottom left is a redevelopment of an abandoned mobile home park in Waltham with what are called zero energy modular housing. And Representative Lanfear lives within sight of this project, and she can tell you what a great improvement it was to get rid of the empty derelict homes and move in modern homes. We do focus on home ownership, and again, with permanent affordability, we use something called equity sharing. The top 2 homes were built by Habitat for Humanity, one in Rutland and one in East Montpelier. The East Montpelier home, the local group was committed to it being a net zero home, and it is. The site was actually donated by a group called the Cross Vermont Trail Association, which maintains a 4-season trail that goes will soon go from Montpelier all the way to Wells River. Bottom right speaks to the value of permanent affordability. We made a $12,000 investment in this home in Brookline back in 1993. And as is typical, people are in a home, a starter home for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and then they move on. And the first 2 families I know moved to the conventional home ownership market. 4th family just bought it. It's now owned by a child care worker and somebody who works at a local mill. It's the quintessential Vermont Cape, and we haven't had to subsidize it for subsequent purchases because of the equity sharing that's built into our work. We do a lot of historic preservation, but it's the tiniest part of our budget. So the River Arts Building is the old Grange in downtown Morrisville. It's now a center for the arts. The Fairbanks Museum, I think everybody knows about, and they won a national award, but they also asked us for some help. The former St. Joseph's School is in the old north end of Burlington and has become a community center, which includes a child care facility, offices for the Association of Africans Living in Vermont, and many other services in the community. And then I was on a bus tour with a number of members of the other body through southern Vermont. And Representative Harrison asked me if I knew anything about the Bridgewater Community School, which had been empty for quite a few years. And he introduced me to the fellow who was heading up the capital campaign. We made a grant through a program called the Rural Economic Development Initiative that I'll talk about in a minute. That helped them win a $400,000 federal grant, and we provided a small historic preservation grant ourselves. The bottom floor here will be a child care center, and will be a bunch of other community uses here as well.
Did you pick up a traffic ticket on your way through Bridgewater?
Not that day.
They have a famous 25-mile-an-hour school zone speed limit, but they don't have a school. The particular sheriff takes delight in anybody going through at anything in excess of 25 miles an hour.
Does it still stay school zone?
I think somewhere it does.
No, that's
I just heard, it was like the day before yesterday, that they've decided to up that to 35 miles an hour. Now the village people are all upset about that.
Sounds
I would
like
say-
sounds like that sheriff generated a client for you or two.
It wasn't quite that far from me. It was more like, well, that's a whole nother story, but suffice to say, it was the only day in my life, shouldn't say that. It was one of the 2 days of my life where I picked up 2 speeding tickets in one day. That was the second one, and I was not happy on that occasion.
That's a
Mr.
bad,
Chairman, I would speak in defense of my constituents that it is a village, and Route 4 is a through highway, and people are traveling at about 50 miles an hour out in the country. But when you get in there, you're in a village, and that highway is at that point a street. And
Oh,
there are people who would like to live safely. And
well, the short story of it, I was taking my daughter to college and going down Route 4, and just before Queechee, I was following a grader, and I pulled out to pass the grader, and I did so getting back in front of the grader just in time for the cop who sits in Woodstock to get me there. And then I spent a few minutes with him as he was giving me my ticket, kept on going down the road after that, came upon that same grader again, went and passed him, and the second time that I got stopped was that cop sitting there in Bridgewater.
no.
My kids will not let me live that down.
Oh, my God.
It was a tough day.
Knock
Sorry,
on
Gus.
wood, Senator Benning. I've never got a ticket.
Yeah,
you will.
yeah, you will.
You
There's a
just
good
jinxed
reason they
yourself.
lapse after a couple of years. The points taken off your license. Anyhow, sorry, Gus.
No, that's all right. I've got two speeding ticket stories to tell, but I'll save them for another occasion, Senator. Uh, so obviously, the conservation of Vermont's farmland is a big part of our work. And it comes with benefits beyond conserving land. And farmers generally use the program because development rights are an asset only if you intend to develop, not if you want to continue to farm. And so most people are using the program to get more efficient, to have less debt, to make new investments, to buy more land, or to help transfer the farm to the next generation at an affordable price. And that's become a bigger and bigger part of our work.
Gus,
When we do conservation work, we're getting what? Yes, Senator.
no. When they get out of the protection program, they have to buy out. If someone goes into it and sells the land for commercial, they have to pay you back or something. How does that work?
They actually don't have it. They need to sell to another farmer. So the current use program, you have to pay a penalty, but once you've sold a conservation easement, you've basically sold that asset, and it's a permanent protection. It's a permanent thing, not a temporary thing.
So they can't get out of it.
They do not get out of it.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
A community could decide to condemn a conservation easement if they felt that it was no longer a good place for there to be agriculture.
Okay.
A municipality could do that, but condemnation would be the solution.
Okay.
NRCS provides matching funds to the program. We've also helped draw in a special first a $16 million grant and now a $10 million grant that's helping with our water quality work. Let's move on to the next slide, Jen. And lots of buffer protection is indicated here, 57 miles of buffers. As I said a moment ago, intergenerational transfers are a big part of our work. So the folks up in the islands at Pegasus Meets were able to get help. I'll show you a story about the farmers on the left, but we've helped them buy first land in Barrytown and then land in Williamstown in a moment. And you may recognize, at least some of you have been around a little while, the fellow in the bottom left picture. That's Sam Burr, who was with Ledge Council for more than a decade. He and his wife have had a farm in Moncton since the early 1980s. This year, we're helping him transfer the farm to his son Silas, who's in the middle there. So lots of intergenerational transfers. We do that intentionally. We've had a federal grant for the last 3 years to help with those transfers. We're hoping to renew it this coming year. And this is, I think, also part of meeting the governor's concern about Vermont's demographic challenge of getting the next generation into agriculture and onto the land and into ownership in a vital way. Let's move along, Jen. Recreation is a big part of our work. I think you've probably heard that Kingdom Trails, the studies that have been done say it has a $10 million impact or more on the economy in the kingdom. I'm sure that that's off a little bit this year because less people have been traveling. We've helped them secure, initially all of their land for all their trails was provided on a voluntary basis, but they've decided, as with the Green Mountain Club, they needed to secure some of that land base, and we've helped them now acquire 2 parcels. The bottom picture is in southern Vermont, a 913-acre preserve along the southern end of Putney Mountain, and again provides access along the lake, biking and hiking path, opportunities for hunting and fishing as well. And given the way real estate is going in southern Vermont, I'm really glad of that investment. This photograph is of the largest intact hardwood forest in northern New England, 6,800 acres in the Equinox Highlands, and lots of other benefits, including recreation, including climate benefits, including water quality benefits. And what the scientists will tell you when they look at the migration of species is that a chunk of Vermont is right in the traffic lane as those species find environments in the south to be less hospitable as it warms up, and they will be coming to Vermont, along with obviously people who've been coming to Vermont since the pandemic. Let's keep moving, Jen. The photo on the left is the Catamount Outdoor Center in Williston, which we helped the community acquire. It's now a nonprofit operation. The photo on the right is from Kingdom Trails. And the bottom photo, again, this group I mentioned earlier, the Cross Vermont Trail, just one staff person, but lots of volunteer energy. They've been on a 10-year campaign, and this fall broke ground on having raised over $1 million for a bridge that will go across the Winooski. They'd provided the land for one of those habitat houses because they didn't need all of the parcel for the trail, but you'll be able to ride on the bike path in Montpelier and over that bridge and up past that home and onto the snowmobile trails and rail trails in East Montpelier and on out all the way to Wells River eventually. So let's keep moving along. That's the day of the groundbreaking for the bridge. So I mentioned Karen Belmore and her partner, John Wagner, who we'd helped acquire 2 pieces of farmland. We have a business planning program called the Farm and Forest Viability Program that offers business planning and technical assistance to farmers all over the state. So in addition to helping them through our development rights program, we helped them write a business plan. And they bought the old country store that had been vacant in the village of Middlesex. They opened it last year. They're doing a great business. They're selling their own products and lots of other local products there. And it's just been a real boon to the village as well. So it speaks to how we try to integrate our various programs to have a strong rural community development benefit. Let's keep moving along. The case we make for housing investment is that it's an economic driver. And as we come out of a recession, building housing, I think the legislature's economist will tell you, has one of the best of any economic activities as a multiplier in creating jobs. The picture you're looking at is an architect's rendering for a 20-unit development that'll break ground this summer in downtown Winooski at the O'Brien Center and provide new home ownership opportunities at a reasonable price for folks. We think in the 170 to 180,000 a unit range because we got a big out-of-state federal investment to make this project happen. Let's keep moving along. This is an indicator of what's going on in the real estate market. And as you see on this chart, the reason the transfer tax is up so much is that expensive homes are selling and selling at a much higher rate than they had been. And as Digger noted, the number of homes that sold in Vermont for over $1 million last year tripled. So the increase in that revenue is coming from high-end sales, not from affordability. And usually when the market rises, it means that the average Vermonter is going to have a harder time affording a home. Land is going to become more expensive. That's part of the reason the legislature increased the transfer tax back in '88 as a revenue source for our work.
Well, those real estate agents are making a lot of money.
Yep.
More friends and money, Senator.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I forgot you were on here.
A big responsibility you gave us last year was with CRF funding, the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So what we did with that, just as a matter of you knowing what we're up to, was to secure 247 new apartments, some by converting former motels into housing. Also, we helped the 12 shelters around the state, including one for veterans down in Bradford, make improvements so that they would be more COVID safe, and that affected about 250 beds. The picture on the left is a new facility for STEPS, which is a violence organization in Chittenden County. They used to have just room for 7 households. Now they can support 21 families with this new facility. We worked with more than 500 farm enterprises. About 125 of them were businesses that needed to navigate because they lost their market. So if you were selling to a restaurant, we were helping them figure out how could they do online sales, how could they do direct-to-consumer sales, and really pivot their businesses. The other 400 farms we assisted were farmers who just needed assistance navigating the various relief programs. And so we worked very closely with the Agency of Agriculture to help people figure out how to put together the right documentation so that they'd be eligible for the programs that were available. So that's been our work with the coronavirus relief efforts. And I should say that these were both heavy lifts. People worked really hard, both on our staff and among our partners, to get this work done so quickly. I mentioned the Rural Economic Development Initiative, which helped Bridgewater get a grant. This is an initiative that came out of your Ag Committee a few years ago. We've gotten $75,000 a year for each of 3 years, and this is dedicated to communities with populations of 5,000 or less. So far, we've helped 24 enterprises or small towns win just about $5 million in grants. There's still over $2 million in that people have applied for that we're waiting to hear how they come out. And what this has done has been to make it possible for people to access resources that they would not necessarily have had the wherewithal to go after. The pictures above on the left is a co-working space in Lyndonville. On the right is the former Scrabble factory in Fairfax that we helped Run Amok Maple get a value-added producer grant. And in the middle is the old Yellow Barn project in Hardwick, where we helped them write a fundraising plan. And they're not done yet with their fundraising, but I think they're up to about $1 million that they've raised to convert that facility for all kinds of food activities. We have a big pipeline in front of us, so the capital budget continues to be an important part of our budget. And whether we look at housing, farmland, conservation, or historic buildings, there's plenty of work that your constituents are asking us to support. And I often say that really what we do is get state funds and federal funds back to your constituents when they've got a great idea that meets our mission, is consistent with our mission. We have one more slide or 2 more slides here, Jen. So here's what the budget looks like compared to last year. And again, as you see, the capital appropriation is to go down by 2.6 million, but it's being replaced by a large one-time appropriation from the governor. We don't think that there's anything in the next package that's equivalent to the CRF. but there may be something along the farm and forest business advising that will be appropriate, and we're talking with the ag agency about that, but it's not clear yet what that might be. And
Wow, that's beautiful.
yeah, so Senator Mazza, you might recall back in 1988, Governor Cunin wanted to buy this land. It's up in Westmore, and a couple from New Jersey beat the state of Vermont to the punch and bought it.
Vincent
They-
Vitoli.
Yep, and they've owned it ever since. And about 2 years ago, they agreed to sell a working forest easement. So there is now public access guaranteed forever to this property. There's 5 to 7 miles of hiking trails on it. All of Long Pond is protected, half of another pond. I'm trying to remember the name, but I'm dropping it now. But it's just a gorgeous piece of land, and I'm glad we were able to,
How many acres is that?
near 5,000.
And they bought it just for nothing, just, they had a home there? Or?
I think they have a home there. I think they just love the land, and they've
Wow.
taken good care of it. And
Yeah, they do have a home there.
Oh,
and quite frankly, we always work on the basis of willing sellers and willing buyers. They've been great stewards of it. And we probably, even though we were buying the easement 30 years after Governor Cunin wanted to buy the land, it's probably more cost effective for us just to have bought the easement and to have the public
Wow.
access we have.
Beautiful.
But I think that this is why we all love Vermont and we love living here. So we're happy to answer your questions.
What was your percentage on that sale, Russ?
That one, I didn't get involved with that one, but I sold the when they first moved here, I sold them automobiles. So I did get something.
What did this sell for price back then? You remember?
I can't
Well,
remember. I remember when they bought it. I can't remember.
Committee, other questions, comments?
I guess the other thing I would say, Mr. Chairman, is just if any of your constituents have a thought or a concern, or you think there might be an opportunity for us to be of assistance, whether it's housing or conservation or the grant writing program or business planning for people working in agriculture or forestry, please let us know. That's what we're here for, is to be of assistance to them. So
When you give money to projects, are they all private enterprise takes them over? They have to be a community? They have to be, or do private folks take them over? No.
Most of the farmland that we're involved in is owned by a private party.
Okay.
But the easement is owned by a nonprofit or a municipality or a state agency.
What about the rentals?
The housing work is generally done by nonprofits. We do have a couple of federal programs that are available to the for-profit sector as well. And obviously when we're working with homeowners, they own their homes. They often are working with a nonprofit who manages the grants to them that help make those homes affordable. And in return, they agree to share the appreciation that might come along over the years. And that's what lets us resell them to another buyer at an affordable price.
How many failures, many people, many organizations that fail and you have to take it back?
We're very fortunate. We've had very little of that. We have worked on a number of occasions to merge organizations. And sometimes that's been mergers between two strong organizations, and sometimes it's been a merger between a weaker organization and a stronger one where they didn't quite have the capacity to keep going. But we haven't had an organization just collapse on us.
Wow, that's a good record.
We'll keep our fingers crossed that it stays that way.
Other questions?
Well, I want to say, since you went to the trouble of showing so much of Windsor County in your presentation, that you folks have done wonderful work down our way. Looking at both Springfield and Windsor, those were among the most desirable places in Vermont to live at one time because you could really make a good living there. It was the precision industry. It was a world class industry, and that part of Vermont was the world center of it. And of course, it's all gone, and making the transition from what it was to what we want it to be is a real challenge. And I think it doesn't happen by itself. It has to be pushed, and you folks have been doing great. When I first got involved, what we used to call the block, the Union Street, the building there on Union Street in Windsor, and it was called the block, and it was a pejorative. It really was a drug haven and a crime haven and just depressing poverty. And what was sad is that originally it had been, where young families in Windsor started out. It was people would live there for a few years and then step up a little bit in the world. It was a happy stepping stone for young people. And when at the ribbon cutting, that you were there, Gus, that you remember, there was an older guy who remembered growing up, being a little boy there. What a nice, so just thank you for your good work. I guess that's the short version. Thank you for your good work.
Well, we appreciate you guys coming. Jen, I don't know if you wanted to kick in anything additionally there that Gus might have missed.
No, I think he hit it all. He was on a roll.
Okay. Next time you come back, though, make sure Jane Kitchell is not on this committee. Be very careful.
Yes, I'm thinking about the ribbon cutting.
Yeah, unless she sends us a whole big chunk of it.
They're getting 20 million from Jane this year and 4 from us.
Yeah.
Who's going to get the front page?
Yeah,
All
20
right.
million times 4 million. Jane wins.
Yep, that second to last PowerPoint slide you had there with the nice purple building drawing on the top. Did you have to spend like 500,000 to get that designed like that? Or we've been having an ongoing discussion about the amount of money going to designers and architects that we're all thinking that maybe we should come back in our next lifetime with a different profession in
I
mind.
guess so. Wow.
You mean design so we could fit it at the top of the page?
Yeah, I was just curious as to how much that kind of thing costs. All right, committee,
Well,
our next group is
thank you
coming
very
in at 2:00. Thank you guys again. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Take care. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gus.
Thank you.
So we have a 10-minute committee break, but we also have this afternoon, we are going to be interviewing Jen Fitch for her, what do we call that?
Confirmation.
Confirmation hearing. Thank you. And Denise has put up her resume on the screen somewhere in this mix. If you get a chance to peruse that before we meet. I don't think we're going to be spending a whole lot more time after we discussed with her the hopeful completion of the MOU that they were working on and her confirmation. I don't think we're going to be here till 3:00 by any stretch. So